Students, welcome to this chapter. So this is chapter number 3 where we're going to look at pilot licensing or certification. So we are going to look at what is required for someone to be called a pilot, what kind of certification do they need to acquire to be able to fly the planes. So simply, pilot licensing or certification refers to permits for operating aircraft. So flight crew licenses are issued by the Civil Aviation Authority of each country, which must establish that the holder has met minimum knowledge and experience before issuing those licenses. So the license, along with the required class or type rating, allows a pilot to fly aircraft registered in the license issuing state. So who are the regulators of these licenses or certifications? So we have the International Civil Aviation Organization, whereby in Annex 1 is called personal licensing, and it acts as the international minimum standard for licensing. So some states can deviate from these standards by notifying the International Civil Aviation Organization about the changes. So, for example, in the US, pilot certification is regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, a branch of the US Department of Transportation. And in here, a pilot is certified under the authority of Parts 61 and 141 of the Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, also known as the Federal Aviation Regulations. So in most European countries, licenses are issued by the National Civil Aviation Authority according to a set of common rules established by the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. So it is also known as Part Flight Crew Licensing. So all the member states of European Union, as well as the members of the European Free Trade Association, for example, Norway, Switzerland, and Iceland, have been granted participation under Article 129 of the Basic Regulation, and they are the members of Managing Board without voting rights. So also in UK, aviation is regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and the UK left the European Union Aviation Safety Agency system on 31st December 2020. So let us look at the general structure of certification. So we have aircraft categories. So an aircraft category is defined by the International Civil Aviation Organization as a classification of aircraft according to specified basic characteristics. So, examples of aircraft categories given by the International Civil Aviation Organization are aeroplanes, helicopters, gliders, or free balloons. So, meaning that a pilot licensed to fly aircraft in one category may not necessarily fly aircraft in another category without an additional license. So if you go to US, they also have their own categories, which include airplane, rotorcraft, glider, lighter than air, power lift, powered parachute, and weight shift control. So what are these licenses? So the International Civil Aviation Organization Annex 1 Chapter 2 specifies licenses for pilots and for remote pilots. So these some of these licenses are: we have the student pilot, whereby a student pilot cannot fly solo without endorsement from a certificated flight instructor or CFI. So in this license, carrying passengers is prohibited. So we also have the private pilot license. So this kind of pilot with this license may fly for pleasure or personal business. So also the private pilots cannot be paid, compensated to fly or hired by any operator. So we also have the third license, which is a commercial pilot license. So for this, pilot can be paid, compensated to fly, or hired by operators and are required to have more training and experience than private pilots. We also have the multi-crew pilot license or MPL. So this kind of a pilot can act only as a co-pilot in multi-pilot aircraft. So we also have the airline transport pilot license, whereby this pilot can act as a pilot in command of multi-pilot aircraft. So let us look at details of these licenses. So pilots of powered aircraft typically attain certifications in this order. So for private pilots, they need 35 to 45 hours of flight time depending on the country. Then we have instrument rating, which needs 40 to 50 hours of instrument time. Then we have commercial pilot who requires 200 to 250 hours of flight time. Then the airline transport pilot requires 1000 to 1500 hours of flight time. So let us look at the private pilot license. So in the US, to obtain a private pilot license, one must be at least 17 years old and have a minimum of 40 hours of flight time. And this includes at least 20 hours of dual instruction and 10 hours of solo flight. So the age requirements for gliders and balloons are slightly lower in this license. So the pilots trained according to accelerated curriculum outlined in Part 141 of Federal Aviation Regulations may be certified with a minimum of 35 hours of flight time. So we have the commercial pilot license. So for commercial pilots can be paid to fly an aircraft. So to obtain a commercial pilot license in the US, one must be at least 16 years old with parent permission or 18 years old without parent permission and should have a minimum of 250 hours of flight time or 190 hours under the accelerated curriculum defined in Part 141 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. So also in this case, the age requirements for gliders and balloons are slightly lower. So also this license includes 100 hours in powered aircraft, 50 hours in airplanes, and 100 hours as pilot in command. And in that case, at least 50 hours must be cross-country flight time. So we also have airline transport pilot license. So airline transport pilots or ATPs must be at least 18 years old and have a minimum of 1500 hours of flight time and including 500 hours of cross-country flight time, 100 hours of night flying, and 75 hours in actual or simulated instrument flight conditions. So also airline transport pilots must also have a commercial certificate and an instrument rating. So ATPs may instruct other pilots in air transportation service in aircraft in which they are rated. So also, airline transport pilots must have current class 1 medical exam, which is more strengthened than class 2 or class 3, and it must be renewed every after 6 months or 1 year depending on the age. So lastly, we have the multi-crew pilot license or MPL, which is a license that allows a person to act as a co-pilot in a commercial air transport operation. So this license is available in UK and the European Union Aviation Safety Agency states, and currently does not exist in US or Canada. So, multi-crew pilot license pilots must be at least 18 years old, and they must have a minimum of 240 hours of flying training, uh, and the majority of which may be a full motion flight simulator with 40 hours and 12 takeoffs and landings, and the total required in an actual airplane before flying passengers. Uh, Also, they also need 750 hours of classroom theoretical knowledge instruction. So let us look at rating and certificates. So to fly a specific aircraft, a pilot must have the relevant class rating or type rating. So a class rating is defined as a classification of aircraft within a category having similar operating characteristics, and these include single engine, multi-engine, land, water, gyroplane, helicopter, airship, and free balloon. So let us look at some of the statistics. So the Federal Aviation Administration of US showed that there were 757,000 pilots in US in 2022, and of which 72,000 were women. So also 281,000 were student pilots, uh, 164,000 were private pilots, 140,000 were commercial pilots, and 167,000 were air transport pilots. Statistics also show that 13,000 were rotorcraft pilots and 21,000 were glider pilots. Also, 125,000 were flight instructors, and 321,000 had instrument ratings. So also there were 304,000 remote pilots in 2022. So also the United States Air Force by then had 19,100 military pilots in 2020. So these are some of the reading materials. So in case you want to read more and understand more of this topic, you can go ahead and read these materials. That's all for now. Thank you.